Welcome to PlayStation Corner, my name is Alex, and today we're taking a look at Wanted Dead on the PS5, a hybrid slasher and shooter. It comes from the makers of Ninja Gaiden and Dead or Alive, so my expectations here are definitely high, but can it deliver on a promising concept? Let's find out. Story, and we take on the role of Lieutenant Hannah Stone, a member of the Hong Kong Police Squad or the Zombie Unit. Now in the opening moments we infiltrate a location that is under attack, even if we were advised to hold our position. What follows is this adventure that takes us all over the city, investigating a major corporate conspiracy. It is trying to go for something that is relatively deep overall, and there's a decent amount of cutscenes as well to back it up, but tonally it just can't quite deliver. It's all over the place as it bounces between serious and immature. Now I'm all for the latter, but the writing here just isn't quite there, and its clear influence No More Heroes, it can't quite reach those great heights. The highlight of the story, it has to be just generally the cyberpunk world that is unique, and I do appreciate the cybernetics that each character has. If you enjoyed the video today, consider hitting subscribe. The support helps a huge amount. It ensures we can bring you more content just like this on a weekly basis. So realistically, you were probably never coming to Wanted Dead for its storyline. You were coming for gameplay, and I get that. The promise of brutality and dismemberment, and I do not blame you. That is exactly what had me intrigued. And there it definitely succeeds in some ways, though there's no question here shortcomings. The core experience, it sets you up with 4 weapons, a katana which you can't change, and 3 guns. That's a pistol and then 2 heavier weapons. Now one is permanent, a machine gun, the other, you have the freedom to pick this up from enemies that do drop them. It's going to take some time to get used to its particular blend of action, but once you do get there, I will give it this, it can be satisfying. I think for many the weapon selection may be disappointing. The only switchable weapon, the gun, it seems to be restricted to a few automatics, a shotgun or a grenade or rocket launcher, but it was at least easy to understand the applications in this world. Where they try to add variety, that's customization of the pistol as well as your main gun. At checkpoints, we can apply upgrades which do gradually unlock with progression. Think the stock, the grip, the clip size, and the paint job. Some of these are purely visual, others they impact several stats such as the gun's ability to pierce armor, the strength, and the accuracy. I like the idea, but it does lead to some trial and error as it's impossible to judge what enemy types are ahead of you. The game gives you no clue, so I guessed I went for balance, and if I died then I did go ahead and adjust. The enemies then as well, they vary from foot soldiers to ninjas to heavies, but one thing is guaranteed, they are absolute bullet sponges. It gives you guns, but it for sure values the katana over anything else. I'm talking some enemies here, I unloaded multiple clips and they still stood. The main focus is the idea of parrying or impacting a stunned enemy. This can be the sword, with swings timed perfectly, or using the pistol when the enemy flashes red. It's often a split-second decision, but the pistol, it basically auto-aims with no sight available like the remainder of the guns on offer. It's basically as much close quarters as the sword itself. The weapons overall, I generally think they feel good. Stats on guns feel like they do make an impact on the sword play. Once you get the defensive strategy down, it feels solid. Just make sure you go through the training options at the gun range at the police station. This punctuates the game's 5 core missions. Now that's not a huge amount of missions, but runtime wise with deaths, for me the game took me around 13 hours. The reason I say this though is because swordplay is combo based, it's combined with a pistol. If you try and just simply slash, it can feel incredibly slow, so you need to really understand the mechanics and how that combo based gameplay works to get you the fastest possible speed. What I really like, however, the skill tree for Hannah. We get awarded skill points with each kill, and while basic, it progressively improves a number of areas. Our combat ability, sidearms such as different grenade types, the number of health packs we can carry, and generally the amount of damage we can deal. I had this fully unlocked for the final mission, and at this point, I felt like I was a badass, something I felt was maybe a little too long coming in the experience. You also do then get support from your team as well, and while you can't impact their stats, they're not useless. They can't be downed or killed, and they do unload a huge amount of bullets into your enemies, even if the damage seems lower than your own. It's also great when you have all four, because there is a medic who will give you a one-time revival should you find yourself downed. I do wish we could play, however, as multiple characters, because here we are restricted to Hannah only, and I would have loved to have experienced the rest of this team. So here's where the problems begin. As much as I was all in for this experience, I'm a massive fan of 3D Ninja Gaiden. It has some glaring issues. The gameplay is as much about gunplay as it is swordplay, and the cover system included is largely what I describe as temperamental. It is automatic and it's just a pain. She often sticks to cover you won't want, or simply doesn't at all. If you rotate the camera too much even to spot enemies, she will just stand up, revealing herself momentarily. It needs a button to stick and unstick, much like Gears of War introduced so many years ago. It just overall feels, I guess, a little archaic. What doesn't help then is it's the enemies. They often deal a huge amount of damage in seconds, but they themselves are absolute bullet sponges. Many of them I unloaded multiple clips outside of foot soldiers, and I felt like I was doing absolutely nothing. Then the environmental design, it's just uninspired. What it does get right initially, somewhat open locations to give you a good amount of freedom to work with, but the final missions 4 and 5, they were sort of tiny corridors and rooms which just proved problematic, from Hannah sticking to the environment to the camera getting wild. This doesn't help the enemies either. The AI, it is aggressive. It's also incredibly dumb, and often they will get stuck on doorways or environmental objects. There was a particularly comedic moment when a heavy was stuck on a beanbag, and I can't really judge because I got stuck there too. You can't walk over it, you've got to shoot it to destroy it. I even encountered a few moments where enemies, they shot through walls at me, and I actually returned the favour because it turns out the pistol is a little bit magic. The bosses are a highlight, honestly, mostly entertaining with some unique designs and often much larger in scale than anything else you've seen. That said though, you'll defeat them relatively easily thanks to that lower than average IQ. This is at least true anyways for 4 of the 5. The final boss is an absolute pain, a cheap difficulty barrier that packs 2 phases, and in their second they have an insta-killer move that is unblockable that you must counter or dodge. It's cheap, it's not satisfying, and I don't believe it's particularly skill-based either. It's just a cheap tactic to demonstrate incredible power. I was stuck on this moment for over an hour. On that note, we should address difficulty curve. I knew it was going to be tough given the team's history, but this one is all over the place. The opening level, for example, feels like this constant uphill battle, but the bosses, they always felt easier than the journey you had to make to get to them. Now, as you do progress as well, it does feel like things get easier because you do unlock more weapon modifications and that skill tree. It's almost like the game couldn't balance the challenge they wanted with a character that is evolving. This is made even more frustrating thanks to checkpoints that do become further and further apart. The only other element of gameplay, you can explore the police precincts. You can, on completion, unlock a new harder difficulty. You also then get a new option for New Game Plus, and it also packs mini games as well. These are actually featured between missions. And yeah, here you can do things such as play a claw machine, sing karaoke, play a retro arcade machine, and eat. Now, 2 of these, they are basic rhythm games reminiscent of Yakuza, which you can then access from the main menu once you do unlock them. I feel like that sums the game up perfectly though. A lot of ideas we've seen elsewhere, but not necessarily as good and without the writing to back it all up. Overall, for gameplay, for all its quirks, I still had fun, but I've seen nearly every element here done better elsewhere. Graphically, it's dated, much like the gameplay, but it still packs some charm. I like our team's general character design, and a few of the enemies, they are definitely creative. I also really like the animations, especially the executions, which are special moves. They're single inputs and a canned animation when an enemy is defenseless and flashing. The gore is also a winner then, with dismemberment throughout the action. And yeah, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this video is demonetized with how frequent it is. It is near a constant flow of blood washing over your screen. I also like the cutscenes. They blend together 3D moments using the in-game engine and some anime, which, while a little jarring at first, actually works to distinguish events occurring at different times. Problems: location design uninspired. The first location an office, then a park, the last few barren streets. Nothing feels like it has a life, and it's pretty cookie cutter as areas go. You won't once see someone in a core level that is not an enemy, so it lacks weight in distinguishing how important our mission is. It doesn't help matters that the last few are tight corridors and rooms which are just not accommodating to the action or the camera that you do control. On top of this then, animations for enemies repeat constantly by type. The dismemberment is never reflective of where you actually slashed with your sword. Think a head swipe results in them splitting down the middle, and even the few visual gags, a censored banner for a special weapon, a chainsaw, it feels like a way of hiding how limited the enemy reaction is to your attack points. On top of this, enemies constantly clip through the world, so you can nearly always spot their cheap placement as you do approach the next, corner in the world. My final issue: it's not exactly pushing the PS5 hardware, yet it suffers from a slowdown. It's targeting 60 frames per second, but it often stumbles. I had moments as low as 40, but the drop is so quick, it really is impactful, especially when in combat, and yeah, it definitely cost me whole fun more than a few occasions. Audio finally, it's a mixed bag. From an effect and music front, I really did like it. A creative soundtrack with a multitude of genres, and the weapons, they generally sound heavy. There's even a few nice effects to make the world feel somewhat alive and lived in. The big issue, however, the voice acting. The core group, I'd consider them fine, I'd consider them at least as good as the script writing. That's all they can work with, but it's the in-game dialogue that grates. It's cheesy, it repeats constantly, and they say the same thing just over and over. The best example, there's a nightclub location. It appears they had one voice actor for every enemy and only 2 lines of dialogue that they just keep on repeating. I hated this so much, I ended up actually turning off the dialogue. Wanted Dead then is an interesting one. It was a tough one to review, in fact, because for all its problems, I still had fun between the moments of, jankiness, for lack of a better term. For every bit of slowdown or cheap boss encounters, there was a moment that made me feel like a badass with a sword, and that really was the game's intended delivery. That said though, I can't forgive the game's flaw when it's coming in at $60 or your regional equivalent, and many games have done this better, including their own Ninja Gaiden or the incredible No More Heroes. It's also worth noting then that this game is incredibly difficult. That is not a problem with the game, it's just a warning. It is not intended for a casual audience, and for many that will stop them from seeing the end game. Even the opening level had me dead on a fair few occasions. Round it out then though with dumb AI, slowdown, weak level design, and this uninspired story, and yeah, it's definitely hard to get behind, even if I did keep on coming back myself. I do think for those that want a challenge, it's definitely worth a look if you've maybe played everything else. For everyone else, however, probably going to be best looking elsewhere. Today it's an average 5 out of 10 from me. That's how our scale works here. We do not play into this whole 7 is an average. It makes no sense to me, but this feels like it is destined to be a cult hit. Hopefully they can drop a patch in the future though to at least tidy some things up. Will you be checking out Wanted Dead though? Let me know in the comments. I've been really excited for this one, so I'm definitely disappointed to deliver this review, but hopefully helps you make a more informed decision on whether to part with that cash. Really curious to see other reviews as well. I'm sure they're going to be absolutely all over the place. Without then luck, hit subscribe, join us here for reviews, deals and VR2 content weekly, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.